This week on RSBANDB Update, the Phantom Guardian arrives and he simply exists. We discuss whether this is good or bad, and where you should use the Phantom Guardian. Also, we look at making combat more accessible, and what the post-Necromancy world looks like from this week's Dev Q&A. This is RSBANDB Update, episode 1002, recorded Thursday, September 5th, 2024. Conjuring a Combat Shaft. Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of RSBANDB Update here, discussing Conjuring new Phantom Guardians, you might say. I'm sure there's a Star Wars joke to be made in there if anybody likes Star Wars in this day and age still. I don't know. But Parnassius, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Back once again.
Thank you for being here. And, we're going to discuss some Necromancy conjure stuff and what the new Phantom Guardian can do in addition to combat this week. And to help us do that, Bears is also here, who has done many a boss release with us here at the podcast. Welcome back, Bears.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
How goes the Zamorak slang? You gone back there yet?
Not too much. My group hasn't been able to sit down and find a time to go recently, so been a little busy.
Fair enough. But on deck this week, the Phantom Conjure, as well as the combat live stream from this week, which wasn't announced in the news post, so it's actually good that we caught that and are able to work some of that into the podcast, amongst other things, and we'll catch up with Bears about how his experience at the Sanctum of Rebirth has been, and just share some thoughts about where we're at now, a month out on that. But before we get too far down the road here, I do want to thank our experienced tier Patreon members, for whom without RSBANDB Update would not be possible. This week, that's Amos Reed, Andrew C., Bladecom, Drama Free, Jason S., Jesse W., Kesky, Lemon Lodge, Mr. T, Ricky A, Rippeth, Runestar, The Naked Captain, Tim, and Truth Ray. You'll hear more about our Patreon offerings a little bit later in the podcast, but if you do want full show notes, we have those at update.show, and the Discord can be found at update.show/Discord. And of course, for the many people who've been hanging out recently in the Friends chat, that can be found in-game at BitsBytes. So let's just start with the new Phantom Guardian, Conjure, Spirit, as they're called here. How did we feel Guardian is not this?
Well, he's not really a Phantom Menace. He's
that's what I was going for. Thank you for picking up the pieces to that. I don't know Star Wars. I don't know. Do you, Bears?
No, not at all.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess that's something we need Uncle Tanis here for then to fill us in on all the Star Wars stuff along the way. But a defensive conjure. I don't know if anybody predicted that that's what we were going to be getting here. Did the defensive nature of it surprise any of you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that.
How about you, Bears?
I guess I didn't put much thought into what I was expecting. It makes sense that to do something like this, and this is kind of like damage mitigation was something that the Conjurers were lacking. So it makes sense.
Right, because you have the skeleton for damage. You have the zombie for a little bit of chip poison damage, and then you have the option of doing big AoE damage when you blow the zombie up. And then you have the ghost, which is your Healy conjure on that. So the Phantom Guardian, from that perspective, is just a purely defensive option. The main conjure Phantom Guardian ability unlocks at tier 5 of your Necromancy talent tree, and we, of course, pull that up by just interacting with the Well of Souls in Anybody who is, sufficiently high-leveled Necromancy, I think it's 106, allows you to slot all 4 of them. With Conjure and Army, you're going to have enough talent points earned to be able to just go unlock both of these upon login. It requires 70 Necromancy to use, hence the tier 5 of the talent tree. And then at tier 6, you unlock the command ability, which requires level 80 Necromancy. So, did either of you have an interesting time with the tooltip here this week when we first got this?
What do you mean?
No? I'm the only one?
No, I just saw that it was defensive. I threw it on there, added it to my rotation because I'm doing a lot of Slayer at the moment, and it's great for Slayer.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, no real difficulties.
Yeah.
With
so the part that was interesting to me is that reduces damage taken from core damage types by up to 5%, capped at 219. Now, I feel like on the surface of that, if you don't see that capped at 219 number, it's not immediately clear. I think what that means, as in, damage types by up to 5% capped at 219, is that, is it going to be a scaling 5% in that regard? But it's just a maximum of 5%. So that 219 number that I just read out right now is interestingly provided by your Necromancy ability damage. It's 10% of that number, the Necromancy ability damage number. And I think that's kind of neat how they're leaning into your offensive ability to provide a defensive value for this conjure. So as you level up and you add more Necromancy power bonus through potions and upgrading gear, you're going to be able to block more damage with the Phantom Guardian. So I thought that was a really neat aspect of it in that regard. When you look at this, do you guys feel like the up to 5% and 10% of Necromancy ability damage is a good spot to have this at?
Yeah, I honestly don't really think that much on those type of things. I just put them on, and if it seems to work well, I keep using it. If it doesn't, I just swap it out for something else. So,
all right, fair enough.
I think Bears is probably the better person to speak to on that.
Well, I was going to say, I'm kind of the same way. I go trial by error. So, like, right now, there's nothing really to switch it out by. But, I mean, we'll kind of get into it later. They were discussing eventually adding more conjures once we get a new one. If it's better than any of the other ones, like, this is going to be the first one taken out of my undead army.
Right, because it's just core damage and, the typeless is there. And, I mean, I'd imagine you have similar numbers to me using first Necromancers and everything. It's going to be close to that.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's
I think
fine
it goes up
for
to
what it is.
235 if you're Elder Overloaded. I think that was what I saw.
Okay.
So, it's not going to make or break my combat experience, I think, because, like, if you look at what is the 5% figure on this, that 219, you would hit that 5% figure if you were hit a 4,380 hit on you. And I think if you're worried, and I'm just going to say this, I think if you're worried about 219 damage when you're being hit 4,380, I think you have bigger problems.
Yeah. Like, so, I mean, there probably already has been a time where someone has stayed alive by 200 HP thanks to this conjure. So, like, that part, that's great. It's nothing that you can, like, rely on for that to happen.
No, exactly.
But it's a nice buff that didn't go over the top, and it's useful though.
Yeah. And it's similar in that same regard to Animate Dead on non-tank armor. When you think about it from that angle, if you were to use Animate Dead on non-tank armor, it's that same sort of 10%ish number in that area. But obviously, we all know what happens when you combine Animate Dead with your tank armor. You get somewhere else entirely on that.
Yeah.
So, and so you've just been basically letting it exist when you've been doing PVM then, Bears?
Yep, I just threw it in my undead army. I did not add it the command ability onto my bar. I have not used it once. I think it'd be fine in AoE situations. I just haven't been in any AoE situations.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so the way it works is that when the Phantom Guardian is hit, it will stack something called Valor, and that stacks up to a maximum of 25 times. And when you're looking at the command ability for this, your Phantom Guardian deals between 45 and 50%, 55% of your Necromancy ability damage as spirit damage to the target and 4 additional targets within one tile of the target. So if things are clustered very closely, you're going to see this work and perform numbers in that regard. So if we just take that, 985 damage mark and you factor in 25 stacks of Valor, and each stack of Valor boosts the command ability by 5%, you're dealing with a 500% damage boost on that for that AoE attack. And I think that's where this thing is going to shine, because I mean, we said that he just kind of exists, but who wouldn't then say no to like a 4900-ish hit in a Slayer setting where you have a bunch of stuff that's all clustered nicely together? I think that's where the command ability shines, is in things like Slayer. I don't necessarily know if there's anything PVM related that can benefit from that.
I don't think it's worthwhile because you can Threads of Fate, Volley of Souls easier, but like minions that are Archiclay Core, it could be decent there. If you get back-to-back minions, so Threads of Fate is on
so if Threads
cooldown.
of Fate is on cooldown, maybe something like that. Yeah.
I could see that being useful there. I've yet to try it. That's kind of a particular situation, but...
And see, here's the thing. Is anybody actually going to count Valor stacks and fire this thing off when it's, say, north of 15? That's the other question, is that the only way you know how well this thing is doing is by looking at your buff bar. And we all know how chaotic the buff bars get in PVM. So I think that's, another thing that just makes it really feel as though it lands properly on the Slayer side of the equation. And I know this is something we'll touch on in the live stream, but in terms of everybody on the panel right now here, are you guys pleased with how this thing has landed in terms of its power and utility? Does it go too far? How is it?
Well, I'm not hearing any screaming about it, so it's either... I mean, I think it's probably just in the right spot, because there's no one screaming that it's too powerful. There's no one screaming that it's underpowered. And people are just sort of, oh yeah, well, it's there. It's something. It does its job, and that's it. And when there's no complaints about it, I think it's generally in the right spot.
Yeah, I did see some. Go ahead.
I think in a vacuum, just this conjure and ability alone, it is underpowered compared to the rest of Necromancy.
Right.
But since the rest of Necromancy is so good, I think it's okay that it doesn't have it's okay that every ability isn't going to hit 30k and deal a ton of damage. Like, there needs to be some quote unquote bad abilities to make the good ones even better.
And I don't think Soul Strike is inherently bad, but you don't use it when you want to deal damage. You use it because you want the stun or the AoE of it. So I get that. And the thing that I ran into with the Phantom Guardian this week is that I felt like my read of the situation on social media and even just in clan chat was that amongst the people who are relatively new to PVM and don't do high intensity PVM and just do the entry to mid level stuff in Slayer, I feel like those people were saying that this familiar should have done more. But on the ultra high end, I feel like, like you said, Bears, we're just looking at this as something that's just gonna sit there and it's just gonna exist, and it's gonna, be like a free 200-ish damage resistance, or rather damage soaking for you and me in this case, and that's pretty much the end of the story for it for people doing PVM, I think, compared to the Slayer side of it. So overall, I think they probably hit the mark with this. And the other thing that I think I just want to address with this is there was the question, well, this is, the fourth Conjure, and this is something that took them a year plus to put out. Why were we, waiting so long for something that many people are feeling, it just exists. That's sort of how it is. But the thing that we saw, and we can read into this from the live stream, and I want to say Summer Summit, but it was the RS Ahead roadmap, is that this is something we can start to expect again for RS3, is just having little updates like this sprinkled throughout the release cycle. Like the Conjure, like we're going to be getting, the new Scabarite Slayer creature and the Slayer helmet add-on. It's content that isn't necessarily a headliner, and I think that's okay, and I feel like that's what RS was built on over the years. So I think, the timing of it is fine, and overall, it provides decent utility. Maybe if I was short on ectoplasm, I wouldn't put it in Army, but I don't feel like it's that big of an issue. Do you?
No. Ectoplasm's cheap and easy to get, so it's not a concern. If I would have a issue with this, it would be the levels.
70 and 80?
Yeah. I would switch the Ghost and the levels for this. The Ghost is significantly better, does so much more, and you unlock it 30 levels before. So
That's interesting.
I think if they switched it, I'm like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. And the Ghost is by far the best Conjurer. So
yeah, level 40 for that, and 60 for the command on it.
Yep.
So, right, because, I feel like the way you look at it is, if you're going to pick a Conjure to not go into combat with, you're going to leave first the Phantom Guardian behind, then the zombie behind. Then it's going to be dealer's choice about whether or not you leave the Ghost or the Skeleton behind. I feel like the Ghost and the Skeleton are about equal in terms of what they bring to the table. As in, you want both of them for your experience. So, which, 10% bonus damage for the Ghost capped at 438, that just adds up over time. That's not something you're going to say no to. So, and Mr. Skeleton, on the other hand, just does very consistent damage. So maybe there is something to be said about, putting the weakest one out last, but there are going to be other options, apparently, for Conjures in the future, and an entire different tech tree they were thinking of doing with the Necromancy design stuff, but they never actually got around to it. We'll get more into that when it comes to the live stream. So, which I think we can go on to now, unless there's any other thoughts on our new Guardian friend.
Nope.
No.
Nope.
Okay.
I'm okay.
Yeah.
As I said, I use it in Slayer, and it does its job. So.
Yeah. How was the AOE?
Not too bad. I've only really I'm doing Creatures of Demonheim at the moment.
Oh, okay.
As my main one. So.
Yeah, and then I guess you just wait for it to stack up till it's a moderate amount, then let it rip. Then.
Yeah. Well, again, it just because I really just AFK Slayer, so it is sitting at number 9 on my bar, so whatever it gets up then, what it's at now.
All right, fair enough. So I guess the final thing then, just to, say, is it worth using in PVM, is that, you're going to just take this thing along and it's just going to exist. It's not like it's going to hurt you or anything, unless you're really pinched for ectoplasm. That's really the only time you wouldn't bring it along. And like you were saying, Bears, maybe you use this as a backup for minions at Glacier. I was using it for a bit of damage to start off my Carapac waves after the jump attacks, because I was, intentionally stacking the hits from it there. So there's a couple of use cases, but you're already managing a lot with Necromancy, so I don't necessarily think that you even need to resort to using the command ability, even though it is just a nice supplement. So, all right, let's move on to the live stream then, because I feel like that's where the bulk of the community news came from this week on all things RuneScape, from the combat live stream that they did. Let's chat about combat. And this was with Mod Ryan, Mod Sponge, Mod Pigeon, as well as Mod Yui and Mod RS Guy co-hosting this live stream. And we're just going to, dive right into this. They started it off, rather interestingly enough, asking the devs what their favorite accomplishments were. Not necessarily in-game, but more from a development angle. Mod Sponge said Zamorak and the combat beta, in terms of, being able to just get things out to the people and have things be tested in terms on the beta side. So that's neat. Ryan had a full plate of experience, of course. He mentioned things like Raksha, Zuck, and more of the system-y related things like Reaper, IFB, and the collection logs. And Mod Pigeon, who is relatively new to the combat team, mentioned the boss fight in Ancient Awakening, and, of course, Sanctum of Rebirth. Which then pivoted the panel to a discussion on making combat accessible to newer players, which was really, I think, the whole shtick of Necromancy when that arrived last year. And, it's up for debate, depending on who you talk to, how that went. So, I pulled out a few bullet points here from the live stream, and the general sentiment was that it's a very hard balancing act to make combat accessible to newer players, but also rewarding and viable to people who are combat veterans. And I think we read between the lines on this, Bears, and say this is how you put Necromancy out, but you have people at the end of the day who are still feeling like, oh, maybe this has devalued my other combat styles at the end of it. I think that's what I read between the lines on this one.
Yeah, that's spot on. I really like the explanation that they said where they're basically like quoting the community saying Necromancy is easier than the other styles. And the reason for that is, and that's coming from the people who understand the other styles. And it's great. You don't necessarily need to understand Necromancy as much to do as much damage. But for the new players, that's great. That's what they want. They want them to be able to sit down and be able to learn the style and learn it quickly and not need to know all the nuances about it. And that's a great point.
And see, that's the thing. And that I feel like that's also a fundamental design philosophy that we kind of got into with the drop rate stuff last week, is that there are things out there such as skill, and it seems as though with Necromancy and the changes that have followed for the other styles, is that the combat team has elected to, in effect, make it so that there's not as big of a skill differential in terms of people who pick up a combat style in game. And the example of this being, at the very extreme end, is that somebody who has absolutely zero idea of what's going on with melee is not going to have a good time, whereas somebody who, just picks up Necromancy and plays through the content will have an actual good understanding of how to use it and how to be effective. Is I think what we get to on that. Where are you at right now in terms of this idea? Are you primarily still using Necromancy, or have you moved back to one of the old comfort ones for you?
I've been using Mage a lot more recently.
Whoa. Okay, we'll hear about that after.
I just kind of switch it up. I think the new tier 95s are good enough that it's at least closer to range and Necromancy. I don't think it's as good, but it's just kind of something different and fun. So that's why I've kind of switched it up.
Yeah, that's good. And I mean, fantasy game. Who doesn't want to use magic, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that surprised me. Then the next
But yeah, I
discussion.
haven't
Go ahead.
really used Necromancy for a couple months because I went through like a range phase before this mage one.
Right.
So it was before the range ones when I really last used Necromancy.
Yeah, and that would have been after the combat beta then, right?
Yeah.
When range got all the buffs and we talked about it being, right up at the top there.
Yep.
So, now in terms of necromancy, one thing they said is that necromancy is easier than the other styles, and they said this is the response for somebody who understands magic, melee, or ranged. And when you compare it against the other styles, there are a lot of issues at the lower levels. And who would have knew that after, 20 plus years of gameplay in this game that you're going to run into all sorts of weird little edge cases in the 3 legacy styles that make it difficult to latch on. And it leads to the question, why would you, choose that when you have necromancy? So with that, realistically, they would like to clean up those styles at the low level. And examples they gave is, why should there be lesser abilities, as an example, like lesser sonic wave? Should there then be game-changing abilities like greater ricochet when ricochet itself is useless? And I just saw the collective gasp of the community with this one because basically what this is saying is that you make greater ricochet the default state for ricochet, and then the upgrade that you get from Raksha does something to that and mutates it, maybe adds another shot or two on top of it. Because isn't that true? I remember not really having a good range setup until greater ricochet became a thing. And I was able to afford it.
Yeah, that's 100% the case. I mean, one of my friends who I do a lot of Zammy with, he finally finishes Bow the Last Guardian, and he doesn't have greater ricochet, so he does not use it because it's not worth using without it.
And this is still a multi-billion GP weapon.
Yeah. So I mean, that's 100% true that you cannot really use range efficiently without this ability that's relatively rare from a boss, and that, in my opinion, I don't like doing. So
Raksha. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Now, they said that this stems from a situation where over the years more and more things were added to combat, and the thought with that is that better rewards is equal to complexity, but the key is to add these sorts of things without overcomplicating the game. And I feel like this is an entirely different design mantra than what we had, even in the Elder God Wars, because you know that there's another ability in game that's that exact same case with greater ricochet, except it's in the magic tree. You don't use concentrated blast unless you have greater concentrated blast.
Yep.
So that feels like that's a new revelation, and with these 3 people, Pigeon, Ryan, and Sponge, maybe there can be some sort of changes on that, and hopefully they'll be able to get those through.
I do find it funny that...
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, Bears has said the same thing I've heard off a lot of people. Raksha is is one of their least favorite bosses. They just don't like doing it. Yet Ryan has said that that's one of his accomplishments. So, but I don't know anyone that I've talked to who likes Raksha.
Well, he meant from a design angle.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I found like the boss fight itself is actually, I enjoy the fight. It's the one, my log there is ugly and awful.
Yeah.
So like that has some negative impact in my opinion.
What's the way to go about that in this day and age with necromancy? Because I remember for dealing with the pools, it used to be bring a melee switch for bladed dive.
Yeah, you can get 2 Threads of Fate soul staps in during that to at least kill 2 of them. and then from there you just don't kill the other two. And in
Okay.
theory, your damage with Necromancy is good enough to skip it.
Okay, carry on. Sorry for interrupting you there.
No worries. I like Rakshas in theory. I just one Greater Ricochet and like 2,000 kills isn't very very fun. I still don't have a spike or a divert either. So like I'm nowhere close to the log.
Wow, in 2,000 kills.
Yeah.
Jesus, you are having bad luck down there.
And it would be fine like if you have bad luck at Zammy, right? Like if you're doing 500%, you're still getting 8 or 9 mil per kill. And those kill times are maybe twice as much or twice as long as a Raksha kill.
Yeah. I also think Zamorak isn't as intense as Raksha, but maybe that's just me.
I agree with that too.
Okay. Because I feel like there's more prayer switching involved at Raksha and movement than at Zamorak. So
yes and no. Movement I think is probably about the same. But
all right, fair enough. And this culminates in a discussion about the difference between the skill ceiling and the skill floor and what can be done on that. How much of that comes from gear in the game? And the example that Pigeon gave is that you can have top-end gear, but still you won't put out the same damage as, the top 50% of people because you don't necessarily understand the systems at play. And this was actually a really, really interesting segue on his part here, because this discussion opened up talking about skill floors and skill ceilings, which for the people who, don't read into that much on the game design front, a skill floor is how easy is it to get into something, and skill ceiling is, well, how much room do you have to grow once you start learning at a thing. If that gap between floor and ceiling is low, you're not going to have much learning to do. Whereas if it's a huge, huge gap, it's going to keep you busy for some time. But I found it really interesting that that's how this discussion was opened up, because the next point was that, well, yes, the gear from Sanctum is able to come from normal mode. The whole reason behind this is to get people using that tier 95 gear to find out how it works and not lock it behind the top-end player, because they want people to use these rewards, get better, and progress on their character. And I thought that was really neat, and I thought that was really good to say as somebody who is in the mid to high-end PVM tier. I really like that.
And and as someone who's low-end, I mean, yeah, that's great, because they want me to enjoy their game and they want me to learn and and
like
be able to access these things without having to do switches and high end and all this sweaty stuff that
let's put this in a perspective for you, Pern. You could, in theory, hunt normal mode, Sanctum, get your own weapons, and have this what is now one of the best Magic sets of gear in game. Yeah. And that would be enough to get you on the road. Obviously, you're still missing things like the Fractured Staff and whatnot, but
the important part that you're missing there is he skips Virago and he skips AOD.
Right.
Like, those are two of the most annoying bosses to get drops
right,
at.
Because also groups, yes? Group PVM.
I was going to say, group PVM, which I just don't do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where do you fall on that, Bears? Because we had a discussion on launch week, and then we had a discussion on drop table week. Do you like this? Do you subscribe to this view here of getting it in the hands of people to make things more accessible and learning experiences?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine to me. I mean, in my mind, the big drop from Sanctum is the shard.
Yeah,
the
which is hard
show
mode.
That too. Yeah, so I don't really have an issue with the weapons being the drop rate that they're at.
Yeah,
I think it's fine. It's kind of exciting to see people being able to easily upgrade into, okay, now I have the best tier 95 dual wield weapons. Like, that's great. That's exciting. It gets more people into combat.
Yeah, absolutely. How do we feel about tectonic armor? Because you also do need that.
Well, I guess if you have the FSOA, this changes. But the new armor that you wear with range is the Anima Core of Siliske with
With ranged?
no, with magic, because
What?
it's the hybrid armor, but what does it do exactly? It mirrors the effect of a War Priest set. So
Okay.
the War Priest of Tuska gives you more crit chance, and you want the crit chance with range or with mage. It's a small percentage, but the tectonic armor isn't good enough, like armor wise, to make up
Well,
that
yeah,
difference.
and it's just a lot more
So-
expensive for the boost that you get from it.
Yeah.
What
So
about
that's what I've been
losing?
wearing.
What about you said our Anima Core is Sliske?
Yes.
What about losing the magic style bonuses on that?
I mean, I've found that the crit. I know some people that do switch to tectonic outside of FSOA. That's too much for me. But I've found I've done more damage with the Siliske set.
That has completely blown my mind.
And it's super easy to get that armor. And then the War Priest of Tuska is just Tuska's minigame thing it takes like 3.5 hours or something.
So what's the
silly
War
like
Priest
that.
of Tuska then compared to the Anima Core Sliske?
I think it's probably only level like 50 or 60.
Oh, okay,
So
so
then
it's the lower version of the
Sliske is-
Sliske one then.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's just basically War Priest, but Tuska instead?
Yep.
But is there any difference between the Tuska
no,
War
so-
Priest and Saradomin War Priest, for example, or no?
Yeah, they have different set effects.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I don't know what. I think one of them will reset. I think it's maybe Zamorak will reset like defensives occasionally.
Right, and I see that War Priest of Tuska, 1% per piece worn to deal a crit against enemies in combat, which makes sense with
So it's 3%.
And then the Anima Core Sliske does what?
So that just lets you choose a set effect of War Priest, and that's what the
and then that ups it
does.
from 80 to 75. Got it.
Yeah.
Huh. The more we know. Well,
So I unperked all my tectonic and threw it on that.
Wow, and you have been using this at high tier PVM, I assume, like your 500 plus.
Yep, that's what I've been using as Hinktum.
Okay.
So it's the only time I've had an issue with armor was once I started getting high enrage at Archclay Core. Once I got 1600, I could start feeling
Right.
it was taking more damage than the tectonic would.
Okay, that makes sense. Huh. Oh, I didn't anticipate us to have a little mini sidetrack there. I don't even remember how we it was because I was talking about, what do you pair with your new wands for magic
Weapons,
armor,
yeah.
but lo and behold, there's actually a decent option for it. Okay.
Yep. And that's it only kind of goes more with the FSOA than the wand and orb.
Yeah, obviously.
The FSOA is the crit
Yeah.
part, but
Yeah. But like you said, you're not apt for switching, so you really haven't felt the need on that.
Yeah.
But when you add this up, if you look at the entire set, it's 23 for the mask, 34 for the head. So we're at 57. 29 for the bottom, so we're at 86 at that point, and then another 14, 15 for the hands and for the feet. So you are giving up about 110, 115 magic style bonus there. But I guess you're saying that the crit, if you're in a fractured staff attack, you just make up for it in that then.
yeah, you do. That 3% makes a difference.
And you're absolutely serious that you're not swapping between that and tectonic.
Correct. I know, like I said, some people do. If I wouldn't have unperked all my Tectonic, I'd maybe consider it, but I'm not going to go through and reperk
Yeah,
it all.
obviously. Okay. That's interesting. And Pigeon's final comment on that was, in terms of locking it behind the top 5% of players, doesn't actually, get more people to do that. And, I've always wanted myself to, use magic, but I've never had the ability to do that. And I have always been a fan of ranged. Whereas, in terms of just lining everything up like this from Sanctum, specifically the weapons, and I'd probably still go for a set of Tectonic myself, just to have it, it definitely feels like they did hit the mark with that.
Yeah.
And in response, and this was another great thing from Sponge in this live stream, in response to people asking, well, why don't you guys just, nerf normal mode? He said there's a huge discrepancy between the people doing normal mode and hard mode Sanctum, and there are far more wands and orbs that come in from hard mode. So to make the one or more valuable, hard mode would have to be nerfed, which sounds paradoxical, I think, to some players.
Yeah, it was absolutely insane listening to some of the stats that they gave.
17%. 17% only of Sanctum kills on any given day are normal mode. 17% only. And since release, across all bosses in Sanctum, they have been killed 4.3 million times. The bosses at Sanctum are the most uniquely killed thing in game. So putting that in perspective, it's not about rate, it's not anticipated. They didn't anticipate this, but this is, of course, having an impact on the supply and demand. So
yeah, and
it's just because so many people are at Sanctum that the prices are where they're at.
Yeah, once the new boss comes out the new scaling boss comes out, those numbers will drop. There'll be less wands and orbs entering the game, and they'll probably start going up a little bit.
Yeah.
Probably not too much, but some.
Probably not as much as first Necromancer, I'd say. Those are about 500, 600 each at this point.
Yeah, and those are going to stay there. That's the same thing that happened with those. They were a couple bill for first week or so, and then they started going down because it was the best boss to do to get money from.
And it's still very good in that regard. So
yeah.
And I feel like we need to have these discussions with the JMods more in terms of bringing this sort of data to the forefront, because it just pops a balloon in everything aspects of the community have been saying on this, and that oh, it's normal mode that's ruining the price. Oh, this is something that should be limited, to people who can only do hard mode, but when in reality here, there is rhyme behind the reason for it. So,
yeah,
we need more conversations like this.
I don't think I've done a normal mode kill since day of release. I'm thinking about maybe just going and grinding out a ton of kills in normal mode just for pet chance, since I have everything else.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I can easily do a run of Sanctum in under 12 minutes, so I might as well just try to get that shard still.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm actually enjoying it too, but we'll talk more about that.
That's amazing. 70% on normal mode.
You think like it's less than 1 in 5.
I know.
Yeah,
I'm sitting there going, "Are you serious?" But but that shows that they've done that boss so well. That it can be done. It's hard enough in hard mode to challenge people, but it's accessible to a lot more people than some of the other ones are.
And it's the same sort of idea as Carapac, in my opinion. That yes, you can get Greater Conch in normal mode, but unless you're an Iron Man and you're just going for a G-Conch right away, you're not really trying to do that. Might as well just wait until you're going for the FSOA.
But even then, at this point,
Carapac,
But even then, at this point, I have to say, if somebody is, looking to get into a boss, I'm going to send them to Carapac normal mode to get started, because the money coming from that, because the jazz pages at this point, is just so good. So there's that side of it too.
Love to know the numbers on normal mode on that boss as well.
Yeah, and there was lots of demand for a data stream in that regard, so hopefully it's something we'll see more of. But in terms of things that, require data and whatnot to be associated with it, I'm going to take a break right now and thank some Patreon members. So this week, I'd like to thank Alaska, Alvaro L., Amos Reed, Anatoly D., Andrew C., Arvid Zell, Bladecom, Brayton K., Jill Burra, Daniel W., Dominic R., Drama Free, Duramax, Greg T., Guy LaFleur, Jacob G., Jade Gizmo, Jason S., Jesse W., Jim M., Kesky, Lemon Lodge, Luminos, Meriwether, Mongrath, Mr. T, right next to Parnassius, Ricky A., Rippeth, Robbie D., Runestar, Samuel FL, Scott DS, Shirtpants, Tabby, Targayen, The Naked Captain, The Dabbin' Goat, Tim, Truth Ray, Ukulele Steve, Woody, and Zand. Big, huge thank you to our Patreon members for getting us over the hump of 1,000. It does mean the world to us. You guys have carried this podcast forward and allow us to do so many interesting and fun things. So pat yourself on the back. It is really appreciated. Goodies for episode 1,000 are in the mail right now, but you can sign up at patreon.com/RSBNB for as little as $1 a month. And in doing that, you gain access to an entire back catalog of monthly bits. Those are bonus shows. We talk about all sorts of things there. Our most recent one was on the quest tier list, this time focusing on Desert Quests. We had 13 or 14 quests, and yet we had a great amount of time for discussion there. We thought we were going to be short on quests there, but it was a fun episode. So if you want to get ready and have a bit of a refresher about what happened in all of the Desert Quests, check that out. It's available now at patreon.com/RSBNB for as little as $1 a month. We also have the VIP tier for $3 a month, where you receive a special VIP rank on Discord, a chat channel, and a mention on the podcast at the start of the month, plus high-quality stereo versions of the show. And for $5 a month, we have our Insider tier, where you get a shout-out on the podcast each and every week, and you gain exclusive access to the outtakes that we use to make the clip show. And you also get the RSBNB Christmas card at the end of the year with that. And, of course, big, huge thank you again to our experienced tier members. These folks make RSBNB Update go. They get to attend a live recording, have a bit of a pre-show, chat with us, and, of course, they every so often they get some fun RSBNB-themed goodies, as we say. But patreon.com/RSBNB. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
All right.
Tell me, on the quest tier list, did you count the Menaphos quests, the 5 little mini quests, as one quest, or did you do them individually?
Like Fight Club, Our Man in the North, and whatnot? Yeah, we did those individually. We did those individually.
Yeah. One quest broken into 5 chapters.
Yeah, I know. It was just a bit of a preview on that. That Desert Quest tier list largely broke our hearts.
Yeah. It's not my favorite quest series.
No. Okay, so there's also talk about what happens now after the 4th Conjure. They talked about appeasing that happy medium, walking down the middle, so people don't say Necromancy's overpowered, but also don't say the Conjure's underpowered, which we talked about and saw both those this week, so that's mission accomplished there. And Mod Ryan said that in something like this, the ideal outcome is that the community is actually split. So again, mission accomplished. And the most interesting bit about this is that they're going to start exploring conjures that have unique niches. So maybe conjures that take up 2 spots. And the example for this is that you could have, say, an undead skeletal dragon that would take 2 slots up. So then imagine with that, then, well, you have 4 conjure slots. What do you bring? At that point, I think it would probably be skeleton, ghost, and the undead dragon. What do you think of that discussion, Bears?
Yeah, that was interesting. The one thing that kind of intrigued me the most was, if you look at the tooltip for Lord of Bones. It says skeletal spirit attacks.
Yep, they mentioned
And
that.
yep, they mentioned that that means if there's a future skeleton conjure that'll also work with Lord of Bones, which is a little intriguing. I think that's exciting.
Yeah, Lord of Bones has really come into its own, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, I said it with the forecast release that they were going to release a boss set and you need it for, and
And
here we are.
everybody that week was calling it useless, both in the community and in the comments.
Yeah.
But here we are. They also have done a post-Necromancy retrospective internally, but have never talked about what happens after Necromancy on stream before, and they're contemplating this might be another thing that they can do about, just say, hey, how did Necromancy land? And go over some of the things now that we're a year out, which I think might be an interesting thing to do. Apparently, in one of the designs, Raziel was supposed to have his own skill tree, like Necromancy Conjure ability tree, corrupted underworld stuff. So, I mean, I don't necessarily know if that was the way to go, or if the boss we got now is good, but that was the thing. They also had the Barrows brothers in the design documents as hero conjures. This is presently not on the horizon. I think that'd be really neat, honestly.
That would be so fun.
I'm just more shocked they didn't even do it as like a skin, like some of the conjures.
You know where this would be a good spot to put this in would be a revamp of Rise of the Six, if they ever did such a thing.
I thought you were going to say Solomon's Store then. Buy skins for your conjures.
No.
But I mean, imagine that. Imagine summoning a Barrows brother to help you. You can only summon one, but because each has their own individual thing. That'd be that. I mean, and again, it's not on the horizon, but it's
something they could do.
A cool concept.
Yeah.
I have a lore question that I might get in trouble for even asking. But after you do all the quests, how many Barrows fights are there? Is there 7 or 8?
So you have the original 6, right?
Yep, and then you unlock 2 more from quests?
Then you have a Crusade, and then you have Linza, so 8.
Okay, so 8. So now you can... So maybe they do a new boss with all 8 of them, and that's where you get these.
Yeah, that'd be neat. I'm just imagining, a more healing-centric conjure than the Ghost that would, fit into the Guthan niche. Similarly, you want something of a Barrows conjure that's going to go berserk that fits into the Darok side. So there's lots of fun things I think you could definitely pull on for that. Another thing that the post-Necromancy world has taught them is that core gameplay, like Greater Ricochet, should not be defined by unlocks. So small unlocks are fine to come through codices. But in the case of Ricochet, it could always have that Greater Ricochet effect, and the codex would add maybe an additional shot. We discussed that a bit earlier in the podcast, but where do we land on this? It would have to be pretty big, I think, because I don't think people would like having something that was, max cash for so long just be relegated to, another 300, 400 mil ability codex.
I'd love it, but yeah, I think I'm in the minority there.
Yeah.
I agree with the concept. What if when they released Necromancy, they didn't give you Volley of Souls? So you could only use your souls with Soul Sap. And then a year later, when they released a new boss, then they gave you a Volley of Souls. Kind of that same idea where it's okay, Volleys of Souls is so much better that you want to use that more than Soul Sap or Soul Strike. So it's I kind of get that. I just don't think you can retroactively change Ricochet at this point. But I think it's a good idea moving forward.
Yeah, but see, that's the thing. The question is, how do you make it so that you can give somebody, a tier 80 or tier 90 ranged weapon and have them be successful without having greater ricochet or unload as the other option that Sponge gave.
Yeah, you really don't.
Because those two base abilities are absolutely useless.
Yeah.
Because on the ultimate side for range, it's basically Death Swiftness, and then I'm forgetting the name of the ability that the Zuck Cape buffs. What is that, Bears?
Not overpower, omnipower.
No, range, not magic.
Oh, Deadshot.
Deadshot, yeah, that's it. And it's like, how do you do ranged without greater ricochet, and what changes can you make to the base game to bring that up so that you don't necessarily need to invest in this codex? Because I remember when I got my greater ricochet and I was using, the Ruby Beck Criminal Bolts back in the day because Hydrix were too expensive for me. I remember stringing together those hits and just how impactful that greater ricochet was. So it's big. And the question is, how do you bring something like that into game without, too terribly offsetting the balance? And I think if they can do that, that would be, a combat update for the decades.
But that's what we were speaking about last week about, drop rates and such. I mean, on that boss, it's just, okay, have your year or so where, people can make their money out of it, but then, increase the drop rate or, have it guaranteed. Okay, it's a 1 in 200 drop. So at 200, you are guaranteed a drop. And if you get one in between, well, hey, that's lucky. But, I mean, I don't have greater ricochet because it's just too expensive.
Yeah, 780 mil right now. And that's how they ended this by saying is that I'm not gonna use ranged if I don't unlock this ability. And the question is, how do you prevent people from saying that?
But I love ranged.
Yeah, me too, absolutely. I feel it's probably one of the most immersive styles that we have because you can make that connection with real life with it. But that kind of goes to what you said next about bad luck mitigation and, people hunting for specific... What was that?
That was a good transition.
Yeah, no, it wasn't planned.
It wasn't, actually. I didn't even read down, no.
And that's the whole thing, is that the only time they'd be willing to do bad luck mitigation is to solve that issue of people like Iron Man wanting a specific drop to get it, to use it, or for people to complete their collection log. And this was an interesting time in the live stream because Mod Sponge said he actually feels different than the rest of the team on this, but he said that players should not have to grind a boss strictly to tick a collection log box. And Mod Orion's response to that was, well, hypothetically, if you were to make it so you get the drops in order, then what's the point of the drop log? In this case, you might as well just have a drop log that has the pet and then some sort of Raziel essence on it, using Raziel for an example, where you can make whatever item you want. Then at that point, you basically just got to get enough of the essences to uncheck everything inside the log. So there's some interesting conversations on that, and I do get the whole bad luck mitigation thing when it comes to completing drop logs. So I don't know.
I kind of liked the RS guy's example that he gave with Bryzol. Was basically, it's like you roll either, instead of rolling main hand, offhand, you just roll a weapon, and then it switches in between which weapon you get.
Right.
So therefore, the next time you roll a weapon, you get the offhand. And then same, you can pair the body and legs, and then pair the helmet, boots, and gloves. And so like you kind of keep rotating among them, and this way you're not getting 5 pairs of gloves before you get a boot. I kind of like that one the best, and it still doesn't change drop rate at all.
And that kind of gets you 90% of the way there to bad luck mitigation without causing too many problems.
Yep. I think I like that solution the most.
That sounds really good.
But that takes a lot. I mean, do you go back and add that to every single boss? That's a lot of work. I mean, is it even worth doing it for the God Wars Dungeon ones? Like, I wouldn't say yeah. I don't think it's worth it for those, but so it's like, where do you draw the line, I guess?
Right, and then I also want to point everybody's attention to the newest, focuses of the Twin Furies and Calphite King. Do you do it for that too, given the fact that, Drygores are now wanted for the Masterwork two-handed sword, and the weapons from the Twin Furies are also wanted for that too? Do you do it for that? And you're right, it's a question of how far you go back. And they did actually say, in terms of going back to things, that they have gotten clearance to do that second path at Vorkath. To basically go back and look at Vorkath's issues. They don't know when they're going to do it, but they're going to. And I feel like Vorkath is not a boss that I would go and kill at this point, personally, right? Just based on how my experience there was. But I also feel like there's a ton of pressure on the team to do Vorkath because of how Vorkath was received so successfully in old school, that I don't think anything they put out for Vorkath on first go was going to be something that people, were going to jump up and down about, just given what it had to live up to. But it's good they're going to go back and look at that nonetheless. Other things they might look at would be Tectonic, but there's no core plans associated with it, and they would like to get some sort of post or page out there that shows a list of all the issues with combat that they have, and then maybe provide a way for players to, give their input to move things higher on that list, because there was lots of comments in chat about, fixing bleeds, for example. But that's pretty much it from the live stream. They are maybe going to look at doing some things to IFB and tweaking legacy things around that, like removing the Jad pet from Soul Wars and just adding it to Jad. Maybe adding a threshold for things like the Mole pet and Tuzzy as well. And then, they just threw out a question there. How rare should Vitalis be? Which I know has been a discussion in the past too.
So those 3 pets are the 3 reasons that I am putting Insane Final Boss on hold.
Mole, Tuzzy, and Vitalis?
Jad, Tuzzy, and Vitalis. Jad's probably not that hard. I just never looked into it. But Tuzzy, I probably did close to 300 kills or so, just BM farming. And it was awful experience. I had no
think
fun.
You expect around, 700, 800 is the expected value.
Yeah. So that's not a
Bears,
fun
did I ever tell you
process.
I got my entire raids log done in 100 kills?
Does that include Tuzzy?
Yes, that includes Tuzzy.
Yes. I told you, he's got the horseshoe.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that's... Jad, I'd love to see Jad on actual Jad rather than just through Soul Wars,
Yeah, I agree.
Because I actually don't mind the fight caves going through and facing Jad at the end, but there's just no reason to do it because there's no real reward.
You should have a chance of getting the Jad pet from actual Jads, where you can print Jads in Zuck. Because let's be honest, going through the old fight caves to get to that wave for Jad, to get one chance at Jad in the modern era, it's more of a time sink than anything. You'd rather be doing it at Zuck, I think.
Yeah, but I mean, again, for someone like me who sort of enjoys that type of thing, I don't mind the grind.
But do you actually can you honestly say that with your current Necromancy gear you would enjoy doing
I'm not saying
the
I
fight
would
caves?
No, I'm not saying it'd be the one that I do full time for it, but just for an occasional, just something different, mix it up. I'm just going to go and do a couple of runs down, a run or two down here, because it only takes like 25 minutes now to go through it with Necromancy. It's not
but
hard
what are you
to
getting
go through
from it? Like, You could
But
spend that time getting Zuck
chance
kills
to fit.
instead.
Yeah, but Zuck is so much more lean forward for me. Whereas the other one's just like, I feel like, I'm chasing the boss. I don't feel like that, sweaty lean forward type thing. I'm just going to run 2 or 3 caves just for a bit of fun and see if I can get it. But I mean, in an extent, as long as it's on every Jad, I mean, the majority is going to be through Zuck. But if there is just that little chance at the other one, occasionally I'll do it.
All right, fair enough. But that pretty much brings us to the end of the live stream here. We're just going to go over some quick patch notes right now as well that we did have this week. So a few notes for mining and smithing. They corrected the progress needed by primal armor spikes from 1100 to 550. So they're smithed at a similar rate to Elder Rune spikes. And they also adjusted Elder Rune armor spikes from 1,000 to 500 in terms of XP. And the primal armor spikes down from 1,400 to 700 to account for their creation speed, being twice of a typical 1-bar items. So it's effectively the same. It's just based on the input that's there. So it's just number finagling at the end of it. Prevented heating of members' unfinished smithing items on free-to-play worlds. Oops. Disassembling primal equipment now has a slightly better chance of materials than Elder Rune equipment. And content that determines lowest skill levels, such as Tears of Gothics and Gothic's Butterflies, will now prioritize 120 skills over 110 skills.
Fair enough.
Should there be a choice in that?
It'd be nice to say, which one do you want to do?
Like, because it's only real 120s, right?
Yeah.
So so if you have not done 120 Necromancy or 120 Slayer, but you also haven't done 110 Mining and Smithing, it's now going to go to 120 Slayer or Necromancy in this regard. But what if you wanted it to be on Mining and Smithing because it was the newest thing? And in theory, then, that is the lowest level. That's not 99. Should there be a choice on this? I don't know. And I was thinking about this, too. It's just so weird how this goes. And
it's a funny one, isn't it?
It's slightly confusing. So
is that saying, like, if I've got 105 smithing, but I've got 112 Necromancy, it's going to put it on Necromancy.
No, let's make it a little bit more complicated. You have 105 smithing, but 107 Necromancy. It's going to go to Necromancy.
Yeah, see that?
Even though smithing is lower.
Yeah,
both in number and XP.
I don't like that at all.
I feel like there should be a choice, if anything, somewhere on this. Maybe with Juna. I don't know. The following items are now available to Iron Man players, available in Commander Conrad's reward shop at Barbarian Assault. The Penance Trident upgrade, the Attackers, Collectors, Defenders, and Healers insignia. Okay. The people who like Barbarian Assault can be happy, and the people who are Iron Man at the same time. I am neither of those.
Really?
Yeah, Barbarian Assault is another thing that I absolutely hate in this game.
I can't imagine you'll find too many people who like it.
I'm doing it by horns on the trader when it comes in.
Yeah, exactly. And like that's the same thing I've said with my old school account, is that you need to reach certain Barbarian Assault levels to do the Conjuring achievement diaries out there. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I did this once before. I did it on RS3. I had ways to help me get through that. I realize there's benefits behind that cape on old school, but I'm just not doing it. It's just like if there was another thing that made me go back to Dominion Tower in this day and age. No, not at all. Not happening.
Let's bring another person in for Necromancy on Temple Trekking.
Stop. Because
Well, you don't want a crazy old man to jump in front of things and running through with necromancy. That'd be so much fun.
No. Okay. What have we been doing? And we'll start with you, Bears, on this, since you were not on for the Sanctum coverage. So what was your initial read of Sanctum after your first couple normal kills?
The normal mode was easy.
Too easy.
And I think it just came. Yeah, and it came down to I like the death mechanic idea.
Oh yeah, I think it's great.
And I think they did implemented that well. But for the group of PVMers that I was with, we just kept full split on, and we died. Okay, cool. We'll keep doing damage. Like, it is what it is, and as long as we didn't die the third time, it didn't really matter. Which never really happened. So that was fine. Then I switched over to hard mode, and I know I'm not very good with precision clicking. That's why I don't play person shooters with keyboard and mouse. So I really struggled with hard mode.
Yeah, you sent me a video that you were quite upset about it not too long after launch.
There was some times, and I've cleaned out or kind of dusted my computer, and it's helped a lot. But my computer was definitely struggling. And yeah, I think I sent you a clip of the ground attack hitting before the animation did, and I was just dead. And so I think I credited that mostly to my computer being very dusty and overheating.
Okay.
So once I kind of got that sorted out, it's been a lot better. And I'm now more familiar with it. I'm anticipating more. So like even if that does happen, I'm still okay. So I finally got my 100 hard mode kills earlier this week, I think. Been out of town every weekend basically since. So that's kind of limited my play time. But I really enjoyed it. And kind of going back to the same idea of why I don't like to Raksha boss, my log sucks there. I got spooned 2 shards in the first 80 kills.
Wow.
So I like this one a lot more. I've made some good money off of it. But I think overall it's a good boss. I've enjoyed it a lot. I'm still doing it, even though I got my 100 hard mode kills. I have everything except the pet. So that's mostly what I've been up to. And then not as successful as you guys will see later, but slowly working towards 5.8 still.
Nice. So did you start off with Necromancy then at Sanctum, just to bring it to that?
Yes, so I did probably my first 2 kills with Necromancy. Then I switched to range. It worked out really well. I bought a shard for, I think it was like 2.5 bill I bought it for. I put it on my bow, the last guardian bow. Yeah. My bow. And then got a shard like right after that and sold it for 3 bill.
And just standard full arrows, I'm assuming, not any kind of sweaty Wen rotation?
No, you want to use Wen because the full arrows reduce your accuracy.
Oh, right.
Which you don't want. Yeah. So then after I got probably 10 to 15 kills with range, I got both weapons in that, so I switched over to mage, and I've done the last 80 to 90 kills with mage.
And I think you also mentioned splintering arrows to me at one point too, or is that somebody else I was talking to?
Yeah, that was because I think after the second week they changed the accuracy, so you definitely needed those week 1, but you don't need them as much now. But
okay.
they definitely helped. Because yeah, otherwise I was sitting there at like 81% accuracy or something silly like that.
Yeah, that's kind of low. I think I'm around 86, 87 fully kitted out with Necromancy when I'm there.
Yeah.
Were you doing any sort of advanced rotations with the Wen arrows in terms of the buff planning and whatnot?
No, I think I was just doing splintering into Wen, or occasionally switching to the ones that give you a free ultimate or free threshold. What, I can't remember what they're called off the top of my head.
Blackstone?
Nope.
What? I feel like it's on the tip of my tongue.
Death Spore?
Death Spore. Yeah. Yeah, those were them.
I'd occasionally switch to those if I remembered.
Okay. Fair enough.
But then, yeah, I've been enjoying using Mage a lot.
So how has that been, going back to that? Because I know prior to Necromancy, that's where everybody was. Everybody was happy with ranged. Or rather, Mage.
Mage, yeah. It honestly, it'd been so long since I used it that I felt like I was learning the style all over again.
Right, and I'd imagine that rotations
that
would have changed and whatnot following the combat updates. So
they
that's
changed.
To be expected.
I mean, instead of using the Armadale Battle Staff as an FSOA, I switched to an Iban Staff, which deals a ton of damage and it's fun to use. Like that sort of stuff changes. So like instead of just sitting there spamming EOF spec for Armadale Battle Staff, it kept giving you adrenaline and you could just keep reusing it.
And so is that the actual Iban Staff, or do you put that in an EOF?
It's in an EOF.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That's tier 50, I think. So.
And then like the fun part is, for some reason, I don't understand it. Bleeds get impacted by Metamorphosis. So, occasionally you use.
Do we know if that's intended?
I think so. As far as I know, it's always been that way. But like, so occasionally, if you like, instead of doing a Sunshine for the last like 100k damage, it's quicker to do a meta, and you can put a bleed down, and that impacts the Soulfire too. So like, instead of it, if it like procs right away, instead of it hitting like 6 to 7Ks, it's hitting like 10 to 11Ks, which is so
right. And I assume you're still leaning into crit with the crit ring and Grimoire and all that, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. And I also feel like you're not reliant on as many EOFs here that are expensive, because you have, for ranged, I'm going to point this out, you have the ECB obviously as an option. You also have the SGB as something you can bring in an EOF, and then you have the Bow of the Last Guardian as the primary weapon there. I know people have I think I've been told, and last time I looked into ranged, have stopped using the Dark Bow as an EOF for that. So in many ways, is it weird to say that post Sanctum it almost feels like Magic is a simpler thing to set up than ranged at this point, in terms of just finding things to invest in? Obviously, the Fracture Staff is going to be the biggest component.
Yeah, I mean, so I bring 3 EOFs to my Sanctum, and one is completely optional, but it's just G-Staff and Ibans, which those are the 2 like ones I use more. And then Obliteration for the second boss.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Just to stop him from healing. But that's completely optional.
Did you have that before or after the price shot up there?
I had like 5 on my Iron Man, so I just dropped 1.
Okay. So, for folks unaware of what that is, Obliteration lowers the amount of healing an NPC does, which can be important for the second boss in Sanctum. So, I just find that so neat that we're at a point here where Magic is now seemingly on par again with ranged, which, as we talked about before, is right behind or equal with Necromancy. And I don't think people anticipated that to be the situation back when Necromancy came out.
Yeah.
So that makes me feel good, and it maybe makes me feel like I kind of need to move away from ranged, because I never really fully invested in ranged. I had the tier 90 armor, I had the SGB, but I didn't put it in EOF. I didn't have the ECB, and obviously now missing the Bow of the Last Guardian and the Elite Dracolich stuff. So if I wanted to go back to ranged, I'd have to, I think, probably spend more on ranged than I would Magic at this point. Yeah,
but you definitely would.
Which one do you think is easier, rotation-wise, at this point, setting Necromancy aside?
It depends. I think range is still easier, but I think it can be more click intensive with, like, if you're just sitting there not switching arrows, not switching spells, then in my opinion range is easier if you're not switching arrows. But if you are switching arrows and spells, then I think mage is easier because you're only balancing between two spells.
Which ones? Insight Fear,
and Extinguinate.
Okay.
So, like, that's easy to switch back and forth. Where range, most of the time you're switching between 3 or 4 arrows, and maybe even
which is 2 quivers, basically, right?
Yep, and maybe even a bolt too if you bring a
Yikes
for Jericho. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess the question at the end of the day, plug and play wise, if you were going to just choose one to go with of those two, magic or ranged, with the tier 95 weapons, which one would you go with? Would you go with the Bow of the Last Guardian, or would you go with the tier 95 wands if you were just to pick one?
I think I like the Bow of the Last Guardian slightly more still, but it's less than I thought it would be. I think the bow is just too fun. I think, and this is just silly.
And in fairness, like you were a ranged person before Necromancy and all that, right?
I've been range and mage. I've liked them both for a while, so they've been tied. But I think I also like the animation for the Bow of the Last Guardian. It looks sick. The jump back and special attack, is probably one of my favorites in the game. So that makes me lean towards that.
All right, and this is all, of course, with our Anima Chorus gay and whatnot that we talked about earlier, with the option of a tectonic swap. Interesting. Well, the more you know, as you head into the other combat styles. I've just been hunkering down with Necromancy, still at this point, so that's why I was unaware of that. But
light magic and dark magic.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I remember that was the discussion we had in the first week. Is Necromancy just purple magic?
That's how I still look at it.
But it's not.
I just look at it black magic and white magic.
It's not. It's different.
Hey, it's still a form of magic. Necromancy is a dark magic.
Well, I don't have as big of an update to provide as Bears did, but I this week, as part of the Conjure testing and just in general PVM stuff, I went back to Sanctum for a bit there, and it's interesting. I'm still at the point with my kills. It's about a dozen in hard mode at this point, where I will feel the rust if I don't go at least a few times a week in terms of the movement stuff there. So I don't know how that feels about you, Bears, if you take like a break from Sanctum.
Yeah, the first couple of times, so like I said, I've basically been out of town every weekend this past month. So I'd play Monday through Friday, do probably like 5 to 10 kills a day, and then by Friday I'd be like, okay, I feel pretty confident, and then Monday I'd come back home like, crap, I don't know how to do this, boss.
Right. It's like, oh, I'm dying and I'm getting hit by these things when I don't normally get hit by them. Is it me? Am I going to play lag? What's going on? But you just gotta, in effect, loosen up the fingers, I guess, to make things work in that regard.
Yeah.
Properly. But in addition to Sanctum, I have also been just chipping away at a few hard mode Carapac Reapers, because I had always said that was a boss I wanted to go for the luck for. So who knows? Maybe that might be something in the future after I get a drop there or something. See, we'll see how that goes. Can you believe in all the normal mode Carapac that I've done? The only two things that I've got have been the gloves and the ability codex. I haven't got the scripture yet. And it's easily north of like I don't know how many hundreds of kills on normal mode, but
poor Shane, he's having some bad luck. Welcome to our world. Sorry, had to do
No,
that.
it's
Had to do
fine.
that.
It's fine. It's fine. Yeah, the mining pet also came in last week in a bit. I think I posted that in the Discord as well in terms of just since we're on the topic of the horseshoe. But that's been my RS this week is been Sanctum and Carapac plus all the farm stuff, and the reason for that is that on old school I'm presently trying to get 75 ranged, which the rates over there are always so different compared to what we're used to on RS3, but 75 ranged unlocks the toxic blowpipe, which is a really good ranged weapon. So I've just wanted to bring things up a bit combat wise on OS just to get ready for those last batches of the Grandmaster quests out there, which actually have some interesting boss fights associated with them. But we do have lots of old school stuff on the way, specifically with the Summer Summit that's happening this weekend. So if that is something you're interested in hearing the perspective on, do check out the show when that arrives on Sunday this week, discussing the Summer Summit. But how about you, Pern? What have you been doing?
Well, apologies to start up for any clan members who's where I spam their feed. I did hit my 5.8 bill that I've been chasing. And you'll hear all about that in the next minute or two.
So it's time to start the skill pier?
Sorry?
Time to start the skill pier?
No, I don't like skill pures. But yeah, I'm still thinking. I'm sort of thinking about the group Iron Man thing. But I've sort of moved back to chasing all the logs, picked up the Heart of the Worm at the Lava Strike Worms, so just 2 more on that to finish that log. Chasing the pet at the Demonheim creatures, and yeah, basically just log chasing now and achievements.
How does that feel? Because it's not guaranteed.
No, see, with Slayers type things, I don't mind because there's just everything's AFK. I mean, Lava Strike Worms are a bit of a pain because you have to click each individual one. You can't just throw on an aggro pot and just let them hit you. But yeah, no, everything else is fine.
All right, fair enough. Yeah, we'll have to think about Group Iron Man as it gets closer.
I mean, don't. I'm also the one who went 38,000 kills at Edimus before I got the pet. So.
Oh my god.
Yes, had everything done by under 10k, and then it took me that much more to get the pet.
I still remember that soul in the wilderness that made you take a break from the game for a few weeks.
That was a Lava Strike. Yeah, got the soul to finish my thing, running back, offered the guys 10 mil as I'm running, not to kill me, and they still did. And yeah, they got nothing because obviously I was out there in poor gear, just the black dragon hide, and well, I kept my bow obviously when I died, but yeah, it took my Ushabti with the thing in there, so yeah, knocked off. I think I took about 10 or 12 days off then, the longest break I've ever had.
Wow. All right. Well, let's get to some achievements then, and we'll hear exactly what skills you topped off in. So start us off.
I'll start us off with that engineer who hit 200 million defense on September 4th. Z with 120 defense on September 4th. Lord Zorik hit 99 rune crafting on September 3rd. And then on September 2nd, we have Highcliff with 200 mil Hunter, Mosin Natha with 120 Invention, and Pero Pacanti with 99 Mining.
All right, then we have Pernasius' 200 mils starting off with Rune Crafting on the 2nd, continuing with Cooking, Attack, Strength, Prayer, Summoning, Fishing, Firemaking, Hunter, Woodcutting, and Construction.
And then the man, the myth, the legend continues on with 200 mil crafting, smithing, agility, thieving, hunter, and divination all on the 2nd.
You forgot fletching.
Congrats to you for that 5.8. Yeah, fletching. Oops.
Yes, hit 19 of them all on was supposed to be on the first for
That's
Father's
probably
Day
when it
over
was. The
here.
system just recorded it a day.
No, it did happen the next day because
Oh,
I
okay.
had some family things on the Saturday which took time away.
Fair enough.
Oh, congrats. And then to continue, we have Battle Slash with 120 farming on the first, Lord Zorik with 99 magic on the first, and then Edict on 99 fishing on the 30th. Congrats, guys.
Nicely done, everyone. Thank you for spicing up the list, Burn.
That's all good. That's all good.
All right, so this is a podcast. There's other podcasts. If you listen to this podcast, you might be interested in other shows. And I surprised everybody at the top of the show here when I said, hey, what if there was another podcast called No Such Podcast? You aren't going to believe who does this show. It's the NSA, the National Security Agency, now has their own podcast. Episode 1 came on September 5th. It was Cybersecurity is National Security. And then episode 2, also that same day, is a chronicle of how they found bin Laden, which covers the basics of foreign signals intelligence. But the entire thing of what they want to do with No Such Podcast is to bring people in from the NSA to have them discuss their role publicly as a combat support agency. And they're also going to talk about foreign signals intelligence, cybersecurity missions, and other things as well. And they say they also want to lean into how they do that because, in their own words, the NSA is known as the world's greatest code makers and code breakers. And this whole thing with the podcast is that these stories are now being decoded. And this is a public podcast that's hosted on the Libsyn website, but it also is on everywhere else that you can find your podcast. Same places Update is, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and others as well. And I just found it so interesting to see that they were willing to, go out there and provide something like this and actually have actual transcripts that look to be human done, not AI done, on this that you can go through and you can just read through the website. So it creates a index in that same way. But I think that my favorite reaction to this was surprising to both of you when I said, hey, the pick of the week is the NSA podcast.
Absolutely shocked that they would bring that out, but this is one I'm definitely signing up for.
Yeah. It's a really interesting listen, I do have to say. And I think perhaps the biggest thing to come out of this is just seeing how you have an agency that is normally so cryptic and normally so guarded, but at the same time they've been able to, in effect, work around the edges and find ways to talk about all these sorts of things. So we'll have a link in that at the show notes at NSA. No, the show notes are not at nsa.gov. Forget that. The show notes for their show can be found at nsa.gov/podcast, but you can find a link to everything in our show notes here at update.show to listen to after you finish this episode of Update, if that is your thing. So I figured I'd throw everybody for a surprise with that, with this pick of the week. But that pretty much brings us to the end of this podcast. We'll let people get off on their own path and go and listen to the NSA if they want to at this point. You guys have anything else you guys would like to add or share before we move on and say goodbye for the week?
Not I.
Nope.
All right, sounds good then. Well, thanks, Bears, for being here. Good to catch up and see how combat has been going post-Sanctum. I know it was a while since we've had a chance to do this, just timing-wise, and Sanctum release week and all that. So good to have you on the show again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And, of course, Pernasius as well, everybody's second favorite Australian. So
Thank you once again.
we'll be back next week for another one. And in the meantime, if you want the show automatically delivered to you, you can subscribe on your favorite podcast listening service, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, Pocket Casts, YouTube, youtube.com/RSBANDB. Do like and subscribe. It means the world to us. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll see you guys next week for another episode of RSBANDB Updates. See you then, everyone. Take care.
Happy Skyping all.